A family posed for what appeared to be an ordinary portrait in their Boston mansion. But when historians examined the photograph more than a century later, they discovered something impossible. Dr. Margaret Chen adjusted her wire-rimmed glasses as she carefully examined the sepia-toned photograph that had arrived at the Smithsonian's photography archives that crisp October morning. The donor, Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore, sat nervously across from her, clutching a worn leather satchel. "This belonged to my great-great-grandmother," Eleanor explained, her voice trembling slightly. "I found it in the attic after my grandmother passed last month. I've never seen this photograph before, but there's something unsettling about it." The formal portrait showed the Hartwell family of Boston, Massachusetts, taken in their ornate Victorian parlor in 1901. 5 family members stood rigidly posed. Patriarch William Hartwell, his wife Constance, their 3 children aged between 8 and 16. Their faces were stern, typical of the era's photography conventions. Behind them hung an elaborate burgundy velvet curtain that framed a large window overlooking their estate. Margaret studied the image through her magnifying glass, noting the exceptional clarity for a photograph of that period. "What exactly troubles you about it, Mrs. Whitmore?" Eleanor leaned forward, pointing with a shaking finger. "Look carefully behind the curtain, Dr. Chen. Do you see it too?" Margaret squinted, adjusting the angle of her desk lamp. There, barely visible in the shadows behind the heavy fabric, was what appeared to be the outline of another figure. Margaret's breath caught as she switched to a higher-powered magnifying glass. The shadowy figure behind the curtain became more distinct. A small hand pressed against the window glass, and what looked like a child's face peering out from the darkness. "This is extraordinary," Margaret murmured, her pulse quickening. "Mrs. Whitmore, do you know how many children the Hartwell family had?" Eleanor shook her head, wrapping her shawl tighter around her shoulders. "The family records I found only mentioned 3 children, Thomas, Rebecca, and little James, but—" She paused, her voice dropping to a whisper. "There are other photographs in that satchel. In every single one, there's always someone hidden, watching from the shadows." Margaret felt a chill run down her spine as Eleanor opened the leather bag, revealing a stack of additional photographs spanning several years. Each image showed the Hartwell family in various settings: garden parties, Christmas mornings, formal dinners. But in every photograph, if you looked carefully enough, there was always an extra figure lurking just out of clear sight. "This defies explanation," Margaret said, reaching for her phone to call her colleague at Harvard's photography department. "The positioning, the lighting, the photographic techniques of 1901. There's no way these could have been doctored or double exposed. Yet here we have evidence of someone who apparently lived with this family but was deliberately kept hidden from clear view." The mystery deepened when Margaret noticed something else. The hidden figure appeared to age across the photographs, growing from what looked like a young child to a teenager over the course of several years. 2 weeks later, Margaret found herself in the musty basement of the Boston Historical Society, surrounded by towering stacks of city records, newspaper archives, and family documents. Her research assistant, David, had spent days combing through birth certificates, census records, and immigration documents. "Here's what we know about the Hartwell family," David said, spreading papers across the oak table. William Hartwell owned 3 textile mills and was considered one of Boston's most prominent industrialists. The family lived on Beacon Hill in a mansion that still stands today. Margaret nodded, studying a newspaper clipping from 1902. "But look at this, David. Every social register, every newspaper mention of the family consistently refers to the 3 Hartwell children, never 4. They spent the morning cross-referencing birth records with family documents. Thomas, born 1885, Rebecca, born 1887, James, born 1893. No other children were officially recorded, yet the photographic evidence was undeniable. "Dr. Chen," David said suddenly, looking up from a leather-bound journal, "I found something. This is Constance Hartwell's personal diary, donated to the Historical Society in 1960. Listen to this entry from March 15th, 1901. William insists we must maintain appearances. The child grows restless, but we cannot risk exposure. Society would never understand our arrangement." Margaret's hands trembled as she reached for the diary. "What arrangement? What child?" "Keep reading, David." The entries became increasingly cryptic, referring to our secret burden, the hidden one, and maintaining the family's reputation. Constance Hartwell had clearly been tormented by some family secret that required keeping a child concealed from public view. Margaret's investigation took an unexpected turn when she discovered Eleanor Whitmore's true connection to the Hartwell family. While reviewing genealogical records, she found that Eleanor wasn't descended from the Hartwells at all. She was the great-great-granddaughter of Mary O'Sullivan, who had worked as the Hartwells' head housekeeper from 1898 to 1905. When confronted with this information, Eleanor broke down in Margaret's office, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. "I'm sorry I lied, Dr. Chen, but I had to know the truth. My family has carried this burden for over a century." Eleanor revealed that Mary O'Sullivan had left behind her own collection of letters and photographs, hidden away in the servants' quarters of the Hartwell mansion. These documents painted a very different picture of the family's secret. "According to my great-great-grandmother's letters," Eleanor explained, "the Hartwells were hiding someone, but not for the reasons you might think. This wasn't about shame or scandal, it was about protection. Margaret studied Mary's carefully preserved letters, written in elegant script despite her humble education. One letter to her sister in Ireland, dated June 1901, was particularly revealing. "The poor child has been through such terrible trauma. Mrs. Hartwell has the kindest heart, taking her in when no one else would, but Mr. Hartwell fears what Boston society would say about harboring a child from such circumstances." The letters hinted at a tragic backstory involving the mysterious fourth child, someone who had come to live with the Hartwells under extraordinary circumstances that required absolute secrecy. Margaret's research led her to the archives of the Boston Globe, where she discovered a series of articles from 1900 about a devastating fire at one of the Hartwell textile mills. The tragedy had killed 17 workers, mostly Irish and Italian immigrants, and left several children orphaned. "Look at this witness testimony," David said, pointing to a newspaper column dated December 3rd, 1900. A mill worker named Patrick Murphy testified that his 8-year-old daughter, Catherine, had been at the mill that day visiting him when the fire broke out. She was initially presumed dead, but her body was never found. Margaret felt the pieces beginning to fit together. The timeline matched perfectly. The mill fire occurred in December 1900, and the first photograph showing the hidden child was taken in early 1901. She drove out to the site of the former mill, now a small park in South Boston. Speaking with elderly residents of the neighborhood, she heard fragments of stories passed down through generations. Mrs. Rosa DeMarco, whose grandfather had worked at the mill, shared a particularly intriguing family legend. "My grandfather always said that Mr. Hartwell saved a little girl from the fire, but that officially she had died with her father. Something about her having witnessed something she shouldn't have, something dangerous. The Hartwells took her in, but she could never be acknowledged publicly because it would have put her life at risk." Margaret realized they weren't dealing with a family's shameful secret, but rather an act of extraordinary compassion and protection. The mysterious child in the photographs wasn't being hidden out of embarrassment. She was being sheltered from a very real threat. Through painstaking detective work, Margaret and David uncovered the full, tragic story of Catherine Murphy. Her father, Patrick, had been more than just a mill worker. He had been documenting unsafe working conditions and planned to testify before a city commission about violations of child labor laws and safety regulations. Patrick Murphy had been gathering evidence against several mill owners, not just Hartwell. Margaret discovered in a letter from a labor organizer. He had proof of bribery, unsafe machinery, and children being forced to work in dangerous conditions. The fire wasn't accidental. It was set to destroy the evidence and silence the witnesses. Catherine had been hiding in her father's office when the arsonists arrived. She had seen their faces, heard their names, and witnessed the deliberate act of murder that followed. When William Hartwell found her unconscious near the mill's back entrance, he realized that acknowledging her survival would sign her death warrant. The conspiracy involved corrupt city officials, rival mill owners, and members of Boston's industrial elite, who would stop at nothing to protect their profits. Young Catherine Murphy was the only surviving witness to a crime that went to the very heart of the city's power structure. "So the Hartwells created a fiction," David concluded. Catherine Murphy died in the fire, but a nameless child lived secretly in their home, protected from those who would kill her to keep their crimes hidden. Eleanor Whitmore nodded through her tears. My great-great-grandmother's letters describe how Catherine was taught to hide whenever visitors came, how she lived like a ghost in that great house, never able to have friends or attend school or live a normal childhood. Margaret's investigation revealed an unexpected connection between the Hartwells and Boston's Underground Railroad network, which had officially ended decades earlier, but whose participants maintained a secret network for protecting vulnerable individuals. The Hartwells had been involved in helping escaped slaves before the Civil War. Margaret discovered in Constance Hartwell's private correspondence with a Quaker minister. They knew how to hide people, how to create false identities, how to keep secrets that could mean the difference between life and death. This revelation cast the family's actions in an entirely new light. They weren't simply wealthy philanthropists helping an orphan. They were experienced operators in a clandestine network designed to protect those whose lives were threatened by powerful interests. Dr. James Morrison, a historian specializing in post-Civil War Boston, confirmed Margaret's findings when she consulted with him. "The Hartwells were part of what we call the Second Underground Railroad," he explained. After the Civil War, the network adapted to help other vulnerable populations: child laborers, women fleeing domestic violence, witnesses to crimes involving the wealthy and powerful. Catherine's story became even more poignant when Margaret realized the incredible sacrifice the Hartwell family had made. By taking her in, they had risked not just their reputation, but their safety and that of their own children. The photographs showed Catherine growing up in the shadows, literally and figuratively, protected by people who had every reason to turn her away, but chose instead to risk everything for a stranger's child. The curtain in every photograph isn't just decor, Margaret realized. It's a symbol of the barrier between Catherine's hidden world and the dangerous public sphere where her enemies waited. As Margaret delved deeper into the family's correspondence, she uncovered the tremendous emotional and financial toll that protecting Catherine had taken on the Hartwells. Constance's diary entries from 1902-1903 revealed a woman struggling with the weight of their secret. "William barely sleeps anymore," Constance wrote in April 1902. "He's convinced they're watching the house. Yesterday, a stranger asked our neighbor too many questions about our family. We've hired additional security, but how do you protect a child who doesn't officially exist? The family had spent enormous sums on private investigators to track the movements of those who might be searching for Catherine. They had also quietly funded the families of other mill fire victims, perhaps out of guilt that they could only save one child when so many had perished. Margaret found evidence that William Hartwell had been gradually moving his business operations away from Boston, selling his mills, and investing in properties in California and Oregon, all part of a long-term plan to relocate the family where Catherine could eventually live openly under a new identity. "Look at this," David said, showing Margaret a shipping manifest from 1904. The Hartwells sent several large crates of household goods to San Francisco, addressed to a family named Morrison. Well, that must have been Catherine's new identity. Eleanor Whitmore confirmed this discovery with another of her great-great-grandmother's letters. "Little Catherine has grown into such a brave young lady. Tomorrow she leaves for her new life in California, where she can finally step out from behind the curtain. Mrs. Hartwell cried for 3 days, but we all know this is the only way she can truly be safe." The photographs had documented not just a family secret, but a years-long rescue operation that had required incredible courage and sacrifice from everyone involved. The last photograph in Eleanor's collection was different from all the others. Taken in 1905, it showed the Hartwell family in their garden, but for the first time, Catherine stood openly among them, no longer hidden behind curtains or lurking in shadows. "This must have been taken just before she left for California," Margaret said, studying the image through her magnifying glass. Catherine appeared to be about 13 years old,